Rain spilled from the heavens like punishment as Ethan Cole's Bentley rolled to a stop near the old district where his memories still smelled of burnt coffee and heartbreak. He wasn't supposed to be there, yet something drew him in. Then he saw her, huddled beneath a broken lamppost, drenched, a paper cup shaking in her hand. Her eyes lifted and time shattered. Lena. The woman he once promised forever, now begging strangers for change. And for the first time in years, Ethan forgot how to breathe. The city never really slept, it just whispered differently after midnight. Inside the glass tower of Cole Enterprises, Ethan Cole stared at the skyline like a man watching ghosts parade across the horizon. The reflection in the window wasn't the one he used to recognize. Sleek black suit, tie knotted perfectly, just set with the kind of precision that came only from control. Control had become his armor. "Sir, the Tokyo investors are waiting on confirmation." His assistant's voice broke the silence. Ethan didn't turn. "Tell them I'll sign tomorrow. I have somewhere to be." The young man hesitated, unsure what could possibly pull his billionaire boss away from a multi-million-dollar deal. But Ethan's tone left no room for question. Within minutes, he was gone, slipping into the black Bentley that had carried him through every success and every lonely night since his divorce. The driver glanced through the rearview mirror. "Home, Mr. Cole." Ethan paused. "No. Drive downtown." Downtown, the one place he hadn't set foot in for 7 years. The place that still smelled of rain, old dreams, and the memory of a woman whispering his name in the dark. Lena Rivers once believed love could feed the soul. Now, she wasn't sure it could even feed the body. She pulled her coat tight around her frame, the fabric too thin to keep out November's bite. The shelter had closed early that evening, and the soup kitchen had run out of bread before her turn. So she stood by the streetlight, paper cup in hand, her pride long since traded for survival. A man dropped a few coins into her cup without meeting her eyes. She whispered, "God bless you," her voice raw from the cold. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when she wore silk instead of rags, when laughter lived in her apartment, when she had someone who called her Lena like it meant something sacred. Ethan Cole. She flinched at the memory, hating that even now, her heart beat differently when she thought of him. She'd left because she believed he deserved more than a woman drowning in debt and fear. He never knew the truth of why she walked away. Maybe he never cared to. Maybe the silence between them was the only thing that still belonged to her. At the edge of town, Ethan's car rolled past the familiar park, now littered with cardboard shelters and shivering silhouettes. He didn't know what he was searching for, only that the night felt heavy with unfinished business. When he'd first made his fortune, he'd promised himself he would never look back. But lately, that promise felt like a curse. Success had come, yes, but peace never did. He could buy silence, but not sleep. The car slowed at a red light. That was when he saw her. At first, it was just the shape of a woman huddled beneath a broken lamppost, rain dripping off her shoulders. But there was something about the curve of her face beneath the hood, the way she cradled the paper cup with trembling fingers. "Stop the car," Ethan said, voice low but sharp. The driver blinked. "Sir, now." Ethan stepped out, the rain soaking through his tailored suit almost instantly. The street light flickered above, throwing her face into momentary clarity, and the world fell silent. It couldn't be. Lena. Her eyes lifted, wide and startled, and in that frozen heartbeat, 7 years collapsed into one impossible moment. He saw everything: the laughter they once shared, the tears that ended them, the nights he begged the universe for closure. She gasped, dropping the cup. Coins scattered, chiming like accusations against the wet pavement. "Ethan," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. He couldn't speak. His throat closed around her name. This wasn't the woman he remembered. She looked fragile, ghostly, her face thinner, her lips pale, her eyes older than her years. But it was her, undeniably her. He took a step closer, then stopped. Pride was a stubborn thing. It whispered cruel questions. "What are you doing?" After all she did. But another voice, one quieter, older, more human, asked something else. What happened to her? "Lena," he finally managed. "What are you doing here?" She gave a small, broken laugh. "Surviving, I guess." The simplicity of her words hit him harder than any accusation ever could. For years, Ethan had imagined this moment the confrontation, the explanations, maybe even an apology. But not this. Not her standing in the rain, hollow-eyed and trembling. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded bill. "Here," he said softly, offering it to her. She stared at the money, then at him. "You think this fixes it?" Her voice cracked not with anger, but with something worse, shame. Ethan froze, the bill still between them. "I didn't mean yes, you did," she interrupted, her hand shaking as she pushed his arm away. "You meant to help, but you don't even see me anymore. You see a ghost." The words burned through the rain. He wanted to say something, anything, but for the first time in his life, words failed him. All he could do was watch as she turned and walked toward the alley, her silhouette swallowed by the mist. He stood there long after she disappeared, rain pouring down like the heavens were mourning something lost long ago. His driver cleared his throat from the car. "Sir, should I?" Ethan didn't answer. He looked at the crumpled bill in his hand, now soaked and useless. Then, quietly, he said to himself, "No, not this time." He pocketed the bill, his mind spinning with memories, guilt, and something dangerously close to hope. If you were Ethan, would you have offered money? Or tried to ask why she was there? What's the right way to help someone you once loved? Leave your thoughts in the comments.
Ethan didn't sleep that night. The city stretched out beneath his penthouse window, glittering like a lie. Thousands of lights, but none warm enough to touch the emptiness gnawing at his chest. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the good kind that burned with the right kind of punishment, and stared at the reflection in the glass. That face, chiseled, successful, untouchable, belonged to a man who had everything. And yet, somewhere in the depths of his own gaze, Ethan saw the truth. He'd spent 7 years building walls around a wound that had never truly healed. Lena's face kept breaking through. Her eyes, those same eyes that once danced with mischief when they were young and broke, were now hollowed by something life had taken from her. It wasn't just poverty. It was hope. He tried to shake the image away, but every time he blinked, he saw her standing under that streetlight, drenched and trembling, asking strangers for mercy. Why, Lena? Why hadn't she called? Why hadn't she asked for help before it came to this? He slammed the glass down too hard. The amber liquid sloshed over his hand, dripping onto the marble counter like spilled guilt. The next morning, Lena woke to the sound of rain again, the steady rhythm that marked the start of another day she didn't want to face. She was in the shelter's hallway, curled up against the peeling wall, trying to ignore the dull ache in her stomach. A volunteer passed her a bowl of oatmeal, and she managed a quiet "thank you." She didn't recognize herself anymore. Her reflection in the cracked mirror looked like a stranger wearing her skin. But last night, seeing Ethan again, it cracked something deeper than pride. He looked the same, older, harder, richer, but underneath, there was something else, something that still remembered her. She wanted to hate him. She'd practiced hating him for years. But when their eyes met, it wasn't hate that burned between them. It was unfinished business. "Don't think about him," she whispered to herself. "He's not your world anymore." But hearts rarely obey the rules that reason sets. Ethan couldn't get through his morning meeting. Words blurred, numbers became meaningless. His assistant droned on about projections and profit margins, but Ethan's mind was elsewhere, at that corner, under that streetlight, in the rain. Finally, he stood. Cancel the rest of the day. Sir? Cancel it. He left without explanation, his tie hanging loose as he walked out into the city, not driven by logic, but by something dangerously close to desperation. It took hours to find her. The streets blurred together, each face a possibility, each corner a memory. He searched near the shelter, the park, the subway entrance. Nothing. By dusk, he was ready to give up, until he saw her. She was sitting on a bench near the river, a paper bag in her lap, feeding crumbs to the pigeons. She looked fragile, but peaceful, until she noticed him. Lena's shoulders tensed. You shouldn't be here. I stopped a few feet away. Maybe not, but I am. What do you want, Ethan? To talk. There's nothing left to say.
7 years, he said quietly. And you're telling me there's nothing? She flinched. You think conversation fixes what's broken? No, he replied, but maybe understanding does. Her eyes lifted, and for a moment the years fell away. They were just two people again, tired, raw, and unfinished. I thought you were doing fine, Ethan said. You disappeared, Lena. No calls, no letters. I spent months wondering what I did wrong. She gave a bitter laugh. You didn't do anything wrong, Ethan. You just succeeded. What does that even mean? It means you were becoming everything you were meant to be, and I was losing everything I was. I couldn't keep up. The debt, the pressure, my father's illness, everything was collapsing. I couldn't let you see me like that. So I left before you realized I wasn't the woman you needed. Ethan's voice broke with disbelief. You left because you thought I'd stop needing you? Tears filled her eyes. You were already halfway gone, Ethan. Your company, your ambitions, they were your new love. I couldn't compete. He took a step closer. You never had to compete. Yes, I did, she whispered, and I lost. Silence wrapped around them, thick, suffocating. The sound of the river filled the spaces between their words. Ethan reached into his coat again, not for money this time, but for something smaller. A ring. His wedding ring. He had carried it for 7 years, hidden in his wallet like a curse. I kept it, he said softly. I couldn't throw it away. Her breath caught. Why? Because, he said, voice trembling, I kept hoping I'd get the chance to ask why you left, and now I wish I hadn't gotten the answer. Lena's tears fell silently. I'm sorry, Ethan. He nodded, swallowing hard. Me too. For a long moment, they just stood there, rain misting around them. Ethan wanted to pull her close, to offer warmth, shelter, anything. But he knew better. He couldn't fix her life with a gesture. Where are you staying? He asked. The shelter, she murmured. Sometimes. He nodded slowly. Let me help you. No, I can't be your charity case. It's not charity, he said, stepping closer. It's unfinished love. Her lips parted in surprise, but before she could respond, thunder cracked overhead. The downpour began again, merciless and cold. Ethan pulled off his coat and placed it gently around her shoulders. Just for tonight, he said quietly. Please. She hesitated, then nodded, just once. The simple act, the way her body shook as his warmth wrapped around her, it was enough to ignite something neither of them dared to name. The rain washed over them, carrying away years of silence. For the first time since their divorce, they were no longer strangers, just two people standing at the edge of what might be forgiveness. Do you think Lena did the right thing by leaving back then? Or should she have trusted Ethan to stand by her? Would you have walked away in her place? Tell me what you think in the comments.
The morning after the rainstorm was unusually bright, cruelly bright, as if the world had the nerve to shine when two hearts were still storming. Ethan woke before dawn, sitting at his kitchen island with untouched coffee. He had sent his assistant home early and turned off his phone, but the silence inside his penthouse didn't feel like peace. It felt like interrogation. He'd spent half the night replaying the moment he put his coat around Lena's shoulders, the look in her eyes when she finally accepted it. Gratitude, shame, and something else, something dangerous. He wanted to go back downtown to make sure she was safe, but reason whispered against it. Don't get involved. You tried once, it nearly destroyed you. Yet his conscience refused to obey. When he finally stood, the decision was already made. Lena sat by the window of the shelter, wearing Ethan's coat. She hadn't meant to keep it, but something about its warmth felt like a promise she didn't deserve. The other women whispered. Rumors spread quickly in places like this. That's real cashmere, one of them said. You got a man looking out for you? Lena forced a smile. Something like that. Inside, she felt a twinge of guilt. She didn't want charity, especially not from Ethan. But the truth was, she'd slept through the night for the first time in months. The scent of his cologne still lingered faintly in the fabric, stirring memories she'd buried beneath hunger and exhaustion. Her heart scolded her. Don't romanticize kindness. He felt sorry for you, that's all. But then she remembered how he looked at her. Not with pity, but with pain. As though her suffering hurt him too. It had to stop. She couldn't let him back in. Not now when she barely had enough strength to hold herself together. That afternoon, Ethan showed up at the shelter's front desk. The young volunteer blinked in surprise when she recognized him. Mr. Cole? Are you here for donations? He hesitated. Something like that. When he saw Lena approach the hallway, he almost smiled. She looked startled, but composed. Too composed, as though she'd rehearsed this moment in her mind. You shouldn't be here, she said firmly. You said that yesterday, Ethan replied. I meant it. He ignored the sting in her tone. You kept the coat. I didn't have a choice. You left before I could give it back. Then give it back now, he said quietly, stepping closer. She folded her arms. Why are you doing this, Ethan? Guilt? Nostalgia? He sighed. Because you're not fine, and I can't pretend I didn't see you there. You saw a mistake, she said, voice rising. A mistake you should have left where you found it. His jaw tightened. Don't you dare call yourself that. For a moment, their eyes locked, anger meeting hurt, pride clashing with buried tenderness. Finally, Ethan said, At least let me take you to lunch. One meal, Lena. You don't owe me conversation or thanks. Just let me see that you're okay. Lena looked around at the peeling paint, the curious stares, the quiet humiliation of her circumstances. A part of her wanted to refuse out of principle, but another part, the one still craving dignity, couldn't bear to be pitied in this setting. Fine, she said. One meal. The restaurant was a small, quiet place near the river, far from the skyscrapers and flashing cameras of Ethan's usual world. He'd chosen it deliberately, a neutral ground where neither wealth nor poverty had power. Lena sat across from him, fingers tracing the edge of the menu without really reading it. The waitress greeted them kindly, pretending not to notice her worn clothes or the faint shadows under her eyes.
Order whatever you want, Ethan said gently. She looked up. You still assume I need your permission to live. He blinked. That's not what I meant. I know, she said softly, but that's what it feels like. The tension between them thickened, but there was truth in her words that he couldn't deny. He had always tried to solve things with action, to fix, to provide, to control. It was how he built his empire, but it was also how he'd lost her. He took a slow breath. You're right, old habits. She looked surprised by the admission. They ordered. Silence stretched while their food arrived, a silence loaded with unspoken things. Finally, Lena broke it. You haven't changed much, she said. Still neat, still calm, still hiding the chaos behind your eyes. He smirked faintly. And you still notice everything. Her lips curved just barely. Some habits die hard. The brief flicker of warmth between them was almost enough to make him forget how far apart they'd drifted. But when she pushed the plate away after only a few bites, He noticed the tremor in her hands. "When was the last time you ate properly?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Does it matter?" "It does to me." "Why?" "Because you mattered to me once, and I don't know how to stop that." The words hung between them like electricity. Lena blinked back tears. "You can't say things like that, Ethan. You don't get to rewrite the past just because you saw me begging." "I'm not rewriting anything," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'm trying to understand how the woman who taught me love could end up believing she doesn't deserve it anymore." That broke her. She looked down, tears slipping silently onto her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper. "Because life doesn't always care about what we deserve." Ethan reached across the table, his hand brushing hers for the first time in years. She didn't pull away, not immediately, but then she did, sharply, like the touch burned. "Don't," she said. "Don't make me feel again." He sat back, pain flickering across his face. "Maybe that's exactly what we both need." She shook her head, grabbing her coat. "No, Ethan. You need closure. I need distance." He stood as she turned to leave. "You can't keep running from everything." She looked back at him, eyes glistening. "I'm not running. I'm surviving." And then she was gone. Ethan remained standing there, staring at the empty chair across from him. The untouched plates, the faint imprint of her hand on the table, they mocked him with memories of what could have been. He didn't chase her. He knew she wouldn't let him, not yet. But as he walked out into the fading light, he whispered to himself, "I'll find another way." Because something inside him, something stronger than pride, had awakened. And once it did, there was no turning back.
The rain had eased by morning, but the city still glistened with sorrow. Ethan tried to lose himself in meetings, numbers, signatures, anything to drown the echo of Lena's voice. But work felt weightless, meaningless. Every call he took, every polished phrase that came out of his mouth reminded him of how hollow success was when the one person who'd once mattered most was out there surviving on scraps. At noon, he called off the rest of the day. "Personal reasons," he muttered to his assistant, not caring about the raised eyebrow. He drove downtown again, this time without a plan, only an ache. The streets were slick, littered with fallen leaves. He passed the same corner where he'd first seen her, empty. The shelter's door was shut tight, a sign reading, "Temporary closure due to power outage." Something cold clawed at his stomach. He parked and walked toward the alley where she sometimes stayed. That's when he saw the crowd. A small circle of people had gathered near the curb, murmuring. In the middle of them, someone was lying on the ground. Ethan's breath caught. It was her! "Lena!" he shouted, pushing through the bystanders. She was unconscious, her skin pale, her clothes soaked. A paramedic knelt beside her, checking her pulse. She collapsed. "Looks like malnutrition and exhaustion. We're taking her to St. Mary's." Ethan's world blurred into motion. Sirens, rain, the metallic tang of fear. He rode in the ambulance, his hand gripping hers the entire time, whispering her name like a prayer he didn't know he still remembered. The hospital was too bright, too sterile, too silent. Ethan paced outside the ER, his suit clinging damply, his heart pounding with every echo of the nurse's footsteps. Time stretched and folded in cruel ways until finally a doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. "She'll be fine. Severe dehydration, low blood sugar, but we've stabilized her. She needs rest and a steady support system." The last words hit harder than they should have. Ethan nodded silently. When they finally let him in, Lena was asleep. tubes ran from her arm to a drip, and her face, though colorless, looked softer in stillness. Fragile, but peaceful. He sat by her bed, the antiseptic air pressing heavy around him. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You always said I work too much. Maybe you were right. I was so busy trying to build something, I forgot how to hold on to what mattered." She stirred slightly, her fingers twitching. He froze, then let his hand settle around hers. Lena woke hours later, blinking against the dim light. The world came back in fragments, the scent of disinfectant, the rhythmic beep of a monitor, and then Ethan's face, drawn and sleepless, resting near her hand. "Hey," she whispered weakly. He looked up instantly. "You're awake." Her voice was barely there. Why are you here?" "Because you scared the hell out of me. You collapsed. They said it was exhaustion."
"Order whatever you want," Ethan said gently. She looked up. "You still assume I need your permission to live." He blinked. "That's not what I meant." "I know," she said softly, "but that's what it feels like." The tension between them thickened, but there was truth in her words that he couldn't deny. He had always tried to solve things with action, to fix, to provide, to control. It was how he built his empire, but it was also how he'd lost her. He took a slow breath. "You're right. Old habits." She looked surprised by the admission. They ordered. Silence stretched while their food arrived, a silence loaded with unspoken things. Finally, Lena broke it. "You haven't changed much," she said. "Still neat, still calm, still hiding the chaos behind your eyes." He smirked faintly. "And you still notice everything." Her lips curved just barely. Some habits die hard. The brief flicker of warmth between them was almost enough to make him forget how far apart they'd drifted. But when she pushed the plate away after only a few bites, he noticed the tremor in her hands. "When was the last time you ate properly?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Does it matter?" "It does to me." "Why?" "Because you mattered to me once, and I don't know how to stop that." The words hung between them like electricity. Lena blinked back tears. "You can't say things like that, Ethan. You don't get to rewrite the past just because you saw me begging." "I'm not rewriting anything," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'm trying to understand how the woman who taught me love could end up believing she doesn't deserve it anymore." That broke her. She looked down, tears slipping silently onto her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper. "Because life doesn't always care about what we deserve." Ethan reached across the table, his hand brushing hers for the first time in years. She didn't pull away, not immediately, but then she did, sharply, like the touch burned. "Don't," she said. "Don't make me feel again." He sat back, pain flickering across his face. "Maybe that's exactly what we both need." She shook her head, grabbing her coat. "No, Ethan. You need closure. I need distance." He stood as she turned to leave. "You can't keep running from everything." She looked back at him, eyes glistening. "I'm not running. I'm surviving." And then she was gone. Ethan remained standing there, staring at the empty chair across from him. The untouched plates, the faint imprint of her hand on the table, they mocked him with memories of what could have been. He didn't chase her. He knew she wouldn't let him, not yet. But as he walked out into the fading light, he whispered to himself, "I'll find another way." Because something inside him, something stronger than pride, had awakened. And once it did, there was no turning back.
The next morning dawned soft and gray, the kind of light that made everything feel like memory. Lena sat by the window in her hospital gown, sipping weak tea.
Outside, the world was just waking up. Cars gliding through puddles, nurses exchanging morning greetings, sunlight breaking shyly through the clouds. Ethan arrived quietly, carrying a small paper bag. "I brought breakfast. Something better than whatever they call food here." Lena looked at him with wary amusement. "Croissants and coffee? That's cheating." "Maybe, but I remember you used to say a good croissant could fix a bad day." Her lips curved slightly. "You remember too much." "I forget everything else," he said softly, "but not that." He pulled a chair beside her bed. The silence between them wasn't tense this time, just delicate, like a truce made of glass. But beneath that peace, questions burned. Ethan couldn't hold them in anymore. "Lena, last night, when you said life doesn't care what we deserve, what did you mean?" She looked down at her cup. "You really want to know?" "I think I've wanted to know for 7 years." Her hands tightened around the mug. "You won't like the answer." "I haven't liked any of this," he said, "but I need to understand it." She sighed, the sound trembling. "All right, but you have to promise not to hate me when I'm done." "Lena, I couldn't." Her eyes flickered to him, searching, fragile, and then she began. "It started right after your first big contract. Remember, the deal with Stratton Corp? You were finally on the rise. Everything you dreamed of was coming true." He nodded slowly. "I remember. You were my anchor through all of it." "I tried to be," she whispered. "But around that time, my father's debts caught up with him. You know he used to gamble, but you didn't know how bad it got. He'd borrowed from the wrong people, people who didn't forgive." Issue furrowed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were building everything," she said, voice breaking. "You had meetings with investors, lawyers. You couldn't risk scandal. If word got out that your wife's family owed money to criminals, it could have ruined your reputation. They were threatening him, Ethan, and then they started threatening me." He stiffened. "What?" "They said if I didn't pay what he owed, they'd come after you. They knew about your business, your schedule, even our house." His pulse quickened. "You should have come to me. I could have handled it." "You think I didn't want to?" she interrupted, eyes glistening. "I tried to protect you. I sold my jewelry, took extra shifts, borrowed from anyone who would listen, but it wasn't enough. So I did the only thing left that made sense to me." She looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. "I left. I thought if I disappeared, they'd stop using me to get to you. And they did. The threat stopped. But by then, so did everything else." The words hung between them like thunder. Ethan stared at her, the truth landing like a punch. "All this time, I thought you stopped loving me." "I never stopped," she whispered. "I just couldn't let them destroy you. I thought if I walked away without explanation, you'd hate me enough to stay safe."
God, Lena. Ethan stood, pacing, his hands gripping his hair. "All these years, I blamed you, I cursed you, and you were saving me." Her voice shook. "Don't make it sound noble. It wasn't. It was stupid. I thought I was strong enough to rebuild. But everything fell apart after that. My father died a year later. I had nothing left. No home, no money, and no way to go back." He turned toward her, his eyes burning. "You could have come home." "I was ashamed, Ethan," she said, her voice cracking. "By the time I thought of it, you were in every magazine, every headline. Ethan Cole, the self-made millionaire. You were untouchable. I didn't belong in your world anymore." He knelt beside her bed, taking her trembling hands. "You belonged because it was ours, Lena. It was never mine alone." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You say that now." "I should have said it then," he admitted. "I was so busy trying to prove the world wrong that I never noticed I was losing you in the process.
I thought success could fix what love couldn't, but it turns out love was the only thing that ever mattered." She closed her eyes, the pain of truth and relief colliding. "You shouldn't forgive me so easily." He smiled sadly. "Forgiveness isn't easy. It's necessary." The door creaked open, and a nurse entered with a clipboard. "Visiting hours are almost over." Ethan nodded, but he didn't stand. "I'll stay a little longer," he said quietly. Lena looked at him with weary affection. "You can't keep doing this, Ethan. You have a company to run." "I have a heart to fix, and it's right here." The nurse smiled faintly and left them alone again. They sat together in silence for a while, watching the drizzle return outside. It wasn't storming anymore, just gentle rain, the kind that felt like cleansing. Ethan finally spoke. "Do you remember that night we got married? You said you'd love me in poverty as long as I didn't lose myself chasing gold?" She nodded weakly. "You found gold anyway." He smiled. "And lost everything worth keeping." Her hand slipped into his. "Maybe not everything." He looked at her then, not the woman begging on the street, not the ghost of their past, but the same girl he fell in love with, stronger for having broken. "Stay with me when you're discharged, not as a favor, not out of pity. Stay because we both deserve a second chance." Her tears glimmered. "And what if we break again?" He brushed his thumb across her cheek. "Then we'll rebuild again, this time together." As the night deepened, Lena finally drifted to sleep, her head leaning lightly against his shoulder. Ethan stared out the window, where the city lights shimmered through the rain. He thought of her father, of the debts, the fear, the impossible choices she'd made. For the first time, he understood the depth of her love. Not the romantic kind that fills songs, but the kind that bleeds quietly in the dark, unseen and unthanked. He whispered into her hair, "You didn't lose me, Lena. You just waited for me to grow into the man you needed." And for the first time since the day she left, he meant every word.
2 days later, Lena was discharged. The morning was clear for the first time in a week. Pale sunlight stretched across the hospital windows, reflecting off puddles that finally began to dry. Ethan had arrived early, coffee in hand, waiting at the entrance like a man who couldn't sit still. He'd insisted on handling all the paperwork himself, despite Lena's protests. "I'm not a charity case," she said, standing beside him in borrowed clothes the hospital had provided. He glanced at her, lips twitching. "No, you're a very stubborn patient. There's a difference." Her laugh was quiet but real. "Still bossy after all these years. And you're still impossible to argue with." They stood in that comfortable silence that only people who've known each other's hearts could share. When they stepped outside, the cold hit them, sharp but clean, the kind that wakes the world up. Ethan opened the car door for her. She hesitated. "Are you sure about this? Me staying at your place?" "Positive," he said, meeting her eyes. "You need rest, and maybe I need company that doesn't talk about market projections." Her lips curved. "So this is a mercy invite?" He smiled faintly. "Call it emotional rehabilitation." She rolled her eyes but got in. Ethan's penthouse overlooked the city, a skyline of glass and silver. It was pristine, elegant, and lifeless. Not a photo frame in sight, no trace of warmth. "Still allergic to color, huh?" Lena teased as she looked around. He chuckled softly. "Designers call it minimalism. I call it loneliness with good lighting." She turned to him, her expression softening. "You've been alone a long time, haven't you?" He admitted. "Long enough to forget how quiet hurts." There was no need for her to reply. She simply touched his arm, and that small gesture said everything words couldn't. Over the next few days, the air in the apartment began to change. Lena, still weak, spent most mornings curled up by the window with a blanket and a cup of tea. Ethan worked from home, his laptop on the kitchen counter as he answered calls and signed contracts, but every now and then his gaze drifted to her reflection in the glass. He'd forgotten how her presence filled a space, how her laughter softened the hard edges of a room. One afternoon he came home early to find her humming in the kitchen. She was wearing one of his shirts, sleeves rolled up, hair loose. The smell of garlic and butter filled the air. "What are you doing?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm making dinner," she said simply. "Someone has to feed you something that isn't takeout."
He smiled. "You remember how?" She turned, smirking. "You forget. I kept you alive for 5 years before you discovered chefs existed." He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in ages. It startled him how natural it felt. As they ate, conversation flowed easily. They spoke of small things: the weather, a stray cat that lingered near the building, the smell of rain on asphalt. But beneath it all, there was a hum of something unspoken, a familiarity too deep for either to name. When she reached to pass him the bread, their hands brushed. They both froze. Her eyes lifted to meet his. The air grew heavy with everything they didn't say. He swallowed. "You know, I used to hate silence after you left." "Why?" she whispered. "Because it sounded like you." She looked away, tears gathering. "Ethan, don't." He shook his head gently. "It's not blame, Lena. It's confession." Later that evening, they sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The city glittered below, a sea of moving lights. "It's strange," she said. "I used to imagine what your life looked like up here. I thought you'd forgotten me." He smiled softly. "Forgetting you was the one thing I never managed to do." A moment of silence. Then she asked quietly, "Why didn't you ever marry again?" He turned toward her, his gaze steady. "Because my heart never signed the divorce papers." Lena blinked, caught off guard. "Ethan." "I mean it," he said. "I built a fortune, but it never filled the space you left. You were the only thing I couldn't replace." She looked down, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I don't know if I can be that woman anymore." He reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers gently. "Then don't be her. Be the woman you are now, the one who survived, who's strong, who's still sitting beside me despite everything." Her breath hitched. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," he admitted, "but nothing real ever is. If you were in Lena's place, carrying a secret that could destroy someone you love, would you have told them or walked away to protect them?" Share your thoughts below. I really want to hear your take on what love means in moments like this. Days turned into weeks. Healing had its rhythm, slow, uneven, but steady. Lena regained her strength, color returning to her cheeks. She started helping around the apartment again, leaving small touches of life everywhere. Flowers on the counter, music in the background, laughter echoing through the hall. Ethan found himself waiting for those moments. The way her laughter filled the silence, the way her smile anchored him. One morning, he walked into the living room to find her sketching near the window. The sight stopped him. "You still draw," he said. She turned shyly. "It helps, like breathing." He looked at the sketch pad. It was a half-finished drawing of the skyline, sunlight spilling between towers. But at the center of the scene, she'd drawn 2 figures on a balcony, watching it all. "Is that us?" he asked quietly. She blushed. "Maybe." He stepped closer, gazing at the delicate lines. "You used to draw our dreams," he murmured. "Now you're drawing what's real." Her eyes softened. Maybe reality is finally kinder than the dream. That evening, as they stood side by side watching the rain return, Ethan reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace, fragile but genuine. He turned to her. "Lena, I don't know what happens next, but whatever it is,
I don't want to do it without you." She looked at him, her eyes glimmering like the city lights below. "Then don't." In that quiet, imperfect moment, where love was no longer fantasy but forgiveness, they leaned into each other, finally finding warmth in the same place where they had once lost everything. Morning came with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt and roasted coffee. Lena woke first, sunlight slanting across the sheets, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Ethan's apartment was too still, too soft to be real. She sat up, pressing a hand to her chest, feeling the steady thrum of a heart that, against all odds, still believed in him. Ethan appeared in the doorway, shirt sleeves rolled up, 2 mugs in hand. "You're awake," he said. "I made the coffee the way you like, too sweet for civilized people." She smiled. "You remember everything. Just the essentials." They shared a small laugh, the kind that feels like sunlight after storm clouds. It was easy, too easy, to believe the world had forgiven them. Until the knock came. It wasn't gentle. 3 hard raps that echoed through the hall like gunshots of memory. Ethan frowned. Expecting someone? Lena's smile vanished. "No." He opened the door. A man in a dark coat stood there, broad shoulders, narrow eyes, a face carved from bad intentions. He held an envelope. "Mr. Cole?" "Yes." "I'm looking for Lena Ward." Ethan's tone cooled. "Who's asking?" "Someone settling old accounts," the man said, his eyes shifting past Ethan toward Lena. "She knows what this is about." Lena went pale. "Please," she whispered, stepping forward. "Don't do this here." The man handed her the envelope and walked away without another word. The slam of the elevator doors felt like a thunderclap. Ethan turned to her, eyes sharp. "What is that?" She didn't answer. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. A single sheet fluttered out. Final demand notice. Outstanding balance, $48,000. Ethan stared. "I thought it was over." "It was," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "At least I thought so. My father's old creditor must have sold the debt. They found me again." "Then we'll pay it." "No." "Lena, I said no." Her voice cracked. "I won't let you fix this. I can't owe you more than I already do." "This isn't about debt. It's about safety." "It's always about control with you," she snapped. "You think money erases pain. It doesn't. It just hides it in nicer clothes." He flinched, caught off guard. "That's not fair." "Neither was losing everything while you built your empire," she cried. "You don't get to play savior now." Her words sliced the air. Silence followed, heavy and raw. He took a step back, his voice steady but cold. "Are you thinking I'm trying to control you? I'm trying to protect you, Lena, because I can't watch you fall again. And I can't be rescued by the man who didn't notice I was drowning the first time," she said softly. The hurt in his eyes was visible, sharp, unguarded. "Maybe we're both still drowning," he whispered. She turned away, clutching the envelope like a wound. "Then maybe we shouldn't be in the same boat." That night, Ethan stood on the balcony long after she had shut herself in the guest room. The city glittered beneath him, indifferent. The wind was cold enough to sting, but not cold enough to numb.
Inside, Lena sat on the bed, staring at the paper. $48,000, an impossible number for her, a meaningless one for him. And yet, it symbolized everything that stood between them: pride, guilt, and the ghosts of choices neither could undo. She whispered to herself, "You said you'd never let him see you weak again." But weakness wasn't what this was. It was exhaustion, grief, love, all tangled into one unbearable ache.
When she finally opened the door, Ethan was still there, silhouetted against the skyline. "Ethan," she said softly. He didn't turn. "You should get some rest." "I can't." He exhaled slowly. "Me neither." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean what I said earlier." "Didn't you?" "I was scared," I admitted. "Every time someone helps me, it ends badly. I've lived too long waiting for the kindness to run out." He turned then, eyes tired. "And every time I try to help someone, they call it control. I don't know how to be anything else, Lena." They stared at each other, the space between them small, but infinite. She reached for him, then stopped halfway. "Maybe we were both broken in the same shape," she whispered. He stepped closer, closing the gap, his hand hovering just inches from hers. "Then maybe we fit for a reason." For a heartbeat, hope flickered, but then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Stratton Holdings. Urgent. Business. The world that had once cost him her. He hesitated, then answered, "Cole." As he spoke, his tone shifted, authoritative, distant, the voice of the man who commanded rooms, not hearts. Lena watched the transformation with quiet devastation. When he hung up, she whispered, "That's the man I left." He looked at her, pain flashing. "It's still me, Lena." "No," she said softly. "It's who you become when you forget why you're fighting." She turned away, tears glimmering. "Maybe love isn't enough when the world keeps pulling you back to who you were." Ethan's throat tightened. "Please don't walk away again." She looked back once, eyes red, but resolute. "I already did. You just didn't notice this time." And she left. Again. He didn't chase her. Not right away. Pride chained his feet, while love screamed for release. He stared at the city until dawn, trying to convince himself that she'd come back on her own. But by morning, her things were gone. The sketch pad, the teacup, the faint scent of lavender that had softened his apartment. All that remained was the envelope on the counter, folded neatly with a single note beneath it. "Don't pay it. If I'm ever going to stand beside you again, I need to know I can stand on my own." Ethan sank into a chair, the paper trembling in his hands. He'd built empires on logic and leverage, but love was a currency that refused to be traded. He whispered to the empty room, "You already stand taller than I ever did." Do you think Ethan should respect Lena's wish and let her face this alone, or step in anyway before her past destroys her again? Comment below, whose side of love do you understand more right now? The world outside moved on, but Ethan didn't. For the first time, silence didn't sound like peace, it sounded like loss. And yet, somewhere beyond that loss, the faintest spark of hope remained. He knew this wasn't their ending. It was the breaking before the rebuilding, the moment love demanded its price, before granting redemption. Ethan hadn't slept. The night stretched into a gray dawn, filled with the hum of the city and the echo of words he couldn't unhear. "If I'm ever going to stand beside you again, I need to know I can stand on my own." He sat at the kitchen counter, the unpaid envelope staring back like a moral test. $48,000. Pocket change for a man like him. A lifetime's wait for a woman like her. He picked it up, turned it over, then set it down again. For years, he'd solved problems with money, decisions, commands. But this wasn't a problem to solve. It was a person to understand, and that was harder than any business deal he'd ever made. Lena spent the next few days in a tiny room she'd rented near the docks. It smelled faintly of salt and rust, The wallpaper peeled, and the heater rattled every time she turned it on. But it was hers. Her choice, her space, her survival. She took up sketching again, selling small portraits near the marketplace. It wasn't much, but it was honest work. People paid what they could. Sometimes they didn't. Still, she stayed, driven by something she couldn't name. Each night, she looked out at the city lights across the water and wondered which of them belonged to Ethan's window. Did he still think of her? Did he still believe? And more painfully, if he did, would she let him? Love had never been simple between them. It had always been a push and pull of strength and surrender, pride and forgiveness. But for once, Lena wanted to be more than the woman he rescued. She wanted to be the woman who could walk beside him without shame. 3 nights later, Ethan made his choice. He didn't wire the money, he didn't call his lawyers. Instead, he drove. The roads blurred beneath him, each street sign a whisper of doubt. He found her by instinct, not logic. A quiet alley behind the market, where laughter and shouting mingled with the smell of fried food and rain. She was there, sitting at her makeshift table, sketching a young boy and his mother. Her hair was tied back, strands escaping in the wind, her face smudged with pencil dust. He stopped a few feet away, just watching her. The world had stripped everything from her, yet she still created beauty out of nothing. When she finally noticed him, her breath caught. "Ethan!" He smiled faintly. "Hi. What are you doing here?" "Trying to buy a portrait," he said. Her lips curved despite herself. "You can't afford me." He stepped closer. "I've been overpaying for the wrong things." For a moment, they just looked at each other, the market's noise fading into a hum behind them. She broke the silence first. "I told you not to come." "I know." "Then why did you?" "Because I realized something. I spent years trying to save you, Lena, but maybe you never needed saving. Maybe I did." Her eyes softened, uncertain. "Saving you from what?" "From myself," he said. "From believing that strength means standing alone." She looked away, blinking hard. "You don't understand. If I let you help now, it's like all that suffering meant nothing. Like I learned nothing." He shook his head. "That's not what it means. It means you don't have to keep paying a debt the world already collected from you." She exhaled shakily, the weight of years pressing on her shoulders. "You always know what to say." "No," he said. "I just finally stopped saying the wrong things." She finished the boy's sketch and handed it to his mother, smiling faintly as the woman pressed a few wrinkled bills into her hand. Then she turned back to Ethan. "So what now?" she asked. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Now, you tell me what you need. Not what I want to give you, not what the world thinks you should take. What you need." She thought for a long moment. "I need to finish this on my own," she said finally. "To pay what's left, even if it takes months. I need to feel like I can breathe without waiting for someone to catch me." He nodded slowly. "Okay." She blinked. "Okay? I'll respect that." Her brows furrowed. "You're not going to argue?" He smiled faintly. "For once, no. But I'll make you a deal." "What kind of deal?" "You let me buy dinner, and I promise not to mention money once." She laughed softly. "That sounds dangerous. It's a start." They ended up at a small diner nearby, the kind with flickering neon signs and greasy fries that left salt on your fingers. They talked for hours, not about the past, not about debts or regrets, but about small things, the color of the sunset, the smell of old books, the way the rain made the streets look like mirrors.
It was simple, human, healing. When the bill came, Ethan slid it towards himself automatically, then stopped. Lena caught his hesitation and smiled. Old habits die hard? He chuckled. Some do. She reached out and took the check from him. This one dies tonight. And for the first time, he let her. Later they walked along the waterfront. The wind was cool, the lights reflecting on the waves like scattered stars. Ethan glanced at her. So, this is what starting over looks like. Messy? She teased. Beautiful, he said softly. She looked at him, eyes glimmering with something fragile but real. You really mean that? I've never meant anything more. She smiled, a small, trembling smile that reached all the way to her eyes. If you were Ethan, could you stand back and let someone you love struggle, even if you could fix it instantly? Or would you step in anyway? Tell me below. What does real love look like to you? Saving or supporting? As they stopped at the pier, Ethan took her hand gently. You said once that you left because love wasn't enough, he whispered. Maybe that's true, but maybe love that survives everything, pride, pain, and silence, becomes something even stronger. She squeezed his hand. Maybe it becomes home. The waves crashed softly below them, and for the first time since fate tore them apart, both of them felt still. Ethan didn't know what tomorrow held, whether they'd rebuild what they once lost or simply walk side by side into something new. But he knew one thing for certain. Love, the kind that costs and heals in equal measure, had finally grown quiet enough to be real.
Winter crept in quietly. The air carried that brittle clarity that makes the world look sharper than it really is. Lena still worked at the docks, sketching sailors and families. Ethan still ran the empire that bore his name. But something inside both of them had changed. They no longer lived waiting for the other's ghost. Every Friday, Ethan visited the marketplace. He didn't announce himself anymore. He simply showed up, bought coffee for her, and sat across the street reading the paper while she drew. Sometimes she waved, sometimes she didn't. Both gestures meant the same thing. We're still here. It wasn't romance yet. It was relearning. One evening, the wind turned wild again, whipping through the stalls. Lena's drawings scattered like birds. Ethan was on his feet before he realized it, chasing them down the street, laughing as the papers fluttered everywhere. "Still rescuing me, huh?" she called, breathless. He grinned, holding up a soaked sketch. Old habits die beautifully. When he handed it to her, she noticed it wasn't one of her market pieces. It was him, the sketch she'd drawn months ago on his balcony. Ethan staring at the skyline, the storm behind him fading. Across the bottom she had written in faint pencil, "The man who still looks for light." He saw the words and went still. "You kept this." "I never stopped seeing it," she said. The moment stretched. Wind, rain, city, everything stilled around them. Then she whispered, "Come home with me, just for dinner, no promises." "Dinner's more than enough." Her apartment was small but warm, the walls lined with sketches, the smell of tomato soup filling the air. Ethan looked around and smiled. "It smells like 2012. "That was a good year," she said softly. "It was the last year I thought I knew everything." She handed him a bowl. "So what do you know now?" He met her eyes. That knowing everything isn't half as powerful as loving honestly. She laughed quietly. "You used to give speeches like that to your investors. This one doesn't need an audience, just you." They ate in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward, it was familiar. The clinking of spoons, the hum of the radiator, simple domestic sounds that once filled their lives. When the dishes were done, she turned to him. "Ethan, about that debt. I didn't pay it," he said before she could finish. "I wanted to, but I realized I'd only be buying back your pride, and I couldn't live with that." She nodded, tears glistening. "I finished paying it last week." His eyes widened. "All of it?" I sold enough sketches, took some commissions. A stranger even bought 3 portraits for his office, said they reminded him of starting over. Ethan smiled. I think I owe that stranger a thank you. You already did, she said softly. He told me his name was Mr. C.L. Cole. He blinked. You knew? I guessed, she said, eyes twinkling. You never were good at hiding generosity. He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. You were supposed to let me have my anonymous hero moment. Consider it shared credit, she whispered.
They sat together on the couch. The city lights spilled through the window like gold dust. Ethan took a breath. Lena, when I saw you on that street months ago, I thought it was punishment. Now, I think it was grace. Life giving us one last chance to do it right. She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. Maybe it wasn't punishment or grace, she murmured. Maybe it was just time, finally catching up with forgiveness. He brushed her hair back gently. Does forgiveness mean you'll come home? She looked up at him, eyes soft. Home isn't a place, Ethan. It's the person who still waits when you're done running. He smiled, emotion tightening his throat. Then I'm home. Later, they stood by the window. The rain had started again, soft and steady, an echo of the day everything began. Ethan took her hands, pressing them against his chest. Remember the first night you said you'd love me in poverty? She nodded, tears threatening. You said you'd love me in chaos. He smiled through the ache. Turns out we got both. And we survived both, she whispered. He kissed her then, not the desperate kind of the past, but the quiet kind that speaks of rebuilding, the kind that says, thank you for staying alive long enough to come back. When they finally parted, she laughed softly. You taste like coffee and second chances. He grinned. My favorite blend. Weeks later, they visited the shelter together, the same one where he'd first found her during the storm. The city had repaired the roof, repainted the walls, added a small garden out front. Lena brought art supplies for the children. Ethan handed the director a donation envelope, not in his company's name, but theirs. From the Coles, the note inside read. As they left, Lena slipped her hand into his. Feels different this time, he said. It is, because we're giving from full hearts, not broken ones. That evening, as they drove home, the sunset bled across the horizon, amber and violet, the colors of healing. Lena looked at him, quiet for a long while, then asked, Do you ever think we lost too much time? He smiled faintly. Maybe, but love doesn't keep time, it just keeps trying. She squeezed his hand, then let's keep trying. Always. If you were Ethan or Lena, would you have believed love could survive so many years, mistakes, and silences? Tell me in the comments what second chances mean to you, and who you'd give one to if you could. Sometimes, the person who deserves forgiveness the most is the one in your own mirror. That night, they returned to the same balcony where their story began. 2 cups of tea, no storms in sight. Lena whispered, You know, you never did tell me what surprised you most the day you found me begging. Ethan smiled, eyes warm. That I was the one in need all along. She laughed softly, leaning into him. And now? Now, he said, pulling her closer, I finally have enough. The camera of imagination would linger there. The city lights, the rain softening the edges, 2 silhouettes entwined, proved that even after the hardest goodbyes, love has the last word. That night, they returned to the same balcony where their story began. 2 cups of tea, no storms in sight. Lena whispered, You know, you never did tell me what surprised you most the day you found me begging. Ethan smiled, eyes warm. That I was the one in need all along. She laughed softly, leaning into him.
And now? Now, he said, pulling her closer, I finally have enough. The city glowed beneath them, two silhouettes framed by light, rain softening the world into something forgiving and new. Because sometimes, love doesn't come back the way you expect. It comes back stronger, quieter, and ready to stay. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. Do you believe in second chances? Would you forgive the one who walked away if they came back changed? And hey, before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another emotional story like this one. We've got many more powerful, real-life inspired tales of love, redemption, and second chances coming your way. Come back soon because every week we'll remind you that love always finds its way home.